and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's weekly show coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow, with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie. We're broadcasting on all our digital platforms throughout the United Kingdom and across the world. We're bringing you quality pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 until 8 p.m. on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, and also on TikTok. This is the show where we're British, we love the United Kingdom, especially on this Valentine's Day, and we want to stay together. And if that's you, please keep watching, and if that's not you, please keep watching anyway, because you might learn something. Folks, please do send in your comments, send in your greetings. Please tell us where you are watching from on this great British evening. And you know, this is the show where we put the United Kingdom first in all things, because we know we are in a fight for the hearts and the minds and the souls of all the people of these here islands. And this is our 90th show, our 90th Good Evening Britain show on this auspicious Valentine's Day, and also Ash Wednesday. It's not often that the 2 days fall together, but they've done so today, and we'll be making reference to that later on in the programme. Now folks, if you're watching on YouTube, please smash that thumbs up button. That's a key way that it tells YouTube that we're broadcasting, and it's a key way that it sends out the notifications to other people. If you're watching on Facebook, please give us a like, and please do share as well. We depend upon our viewers getting this message out. And if you're watching on Twitter, now called X, please give us a repost. And if you do a quote repost with a positive comment, then we can repost that post to 28,000 people. A win-win situation, a 360 win. So folks, please do that. And please note that we're now monetized on YouTube as well, and we're open for super chats. Now let's say hello to some of the people who are here tonight. Derek was first in, and he says, hello everyone, I hope you're all doing well. I see Useless, meaning Yusuf, away to Qatar at our expense, no doubt. I also want to say that the great DJ Steve Wright sadly passed away on Monday, a great national treasure, and sad that he's gone. Indeed, it is. Many of us remember Steve Wright in the afternoon, way back as long as I can remember. Good evening to you, Debbie, as well. And Derek says, happy Valentine's Day. Melissa says, hey, Alistair. And TC says, good evening to all fellow Unionists. Well, good evening to you, TC, and to you, Melissa, as well. And to Kat. Good stuff says, hello, everyone, happy St Valentine's Day. As does Catherine say hello, and to Alan, nice to see Alan as always in the house. Great stuff. And folks on TikTok here, nice to see the comments. Please send them in. And Dylan says, great to meet a fellow Unionist and proud Scot. Hello from Perth. Hello to you, Dylan. Hope you're well this evening. Please keep watching. It's going to be quite a busy week actually in British politics. We've got, well, what's left of it, that is, we've got 2 by-elections tomorrow. One is in Wellingborough and the other is in a place called Kinghorn. And the one in Wellingborough is a result of the Tory man having been subject to a recall petition. And it's going to be interesting to see who wins that. It's a very strong Tory area. They have a majority of that last election of at least 18,000. So they are the projected to win it. But everybody will be looking at to see how their majority has been reduced. And many people will be watching to see how well the Reform UK candidate is going to do, and he is the strongest candidate that they've got. That's Ben Habib, who many of you will know, regular performer, a regular guest, I should say, on GB News. So just how he does in that strong Tory area may give people an understanding of what Reform is going to do and what it's going to be able to deliver, and the impact that it's going to make on the Tory marginals at the next general election. So that's going to be a good one. The other one is in Kinghorn, which is a result of the Tory just resigning. He was clearly in the wrong party to begin with, and he resigned over something to do with global warming. So that tells you really everything. And he was on the wrong side of that particular debate, you know. So he resigned on that, and the seat became vacant. And then there's another one on the 29th of February, which is going to be very interesting. That's in Rochdale, and the Labour have withdrawn their support for the Labour candidate because of various controversial comments that he made. And so Labour won't be campaigning officially for the Labour candidate, and it's likely that many of those votes will actually go to George Galloway. And the last I heard, it was George Galloway who was the favourite to win the Rochdale one, but that's not until the 29th of February. But in the meantime, we've got a couple tomorrow. Tell us what your thoughts are on that and who's likely to win it. British Legend says hello, Alistair, and Christopher says good evening from Falkirk to all, as does Ryan from the West Riding of Yorkshire. Good evening to you, Ryan. Tepes says they are Conservative in name only. And there's also the Pad says the Northern Ireland Assembly is now up and running, and it is. Send in your thoughts on that. Is that a good thing, Pad, or not, in your opinion? So, the other crazy thing that was happening as well this week was, and we'll just talk about this for a moment, was Labour, now I'm going to say MP, Douglas Chapman, found out that there's a cafe in Edinburgh Castle called the Redcoat Cafe. And Douglas Chapman has form for making crazy comments on his Facebook and Twitter pages, but he got all upset about this, and he did one of these pylons, as it were, and got all his colleagues to attack the Redcoat Cafe inside Edinburgh Castle, and not really quite sure why, but I'm presuming they identify being very, very poor at their Scottish history. They presume that Redcoats is maybe some kind of English thing or something like that. Well, I'm just going to show you in a few moments that it's most certainly not. But he did that as well without realising that the Redcoat Cafe is complementary to the Jacobite dinner venue, which sits next door, a prestigious dinner venue in Edinburgh Castle, which sits next door to the Redcoat Cafe. That's why they put the two of them presumably together, and created such a storm that the people in charge of those venues, which is something called Historic Environment Scotland, HES, which is a government quango, they said that they're now going to review the names of these establishments. Well, I hope that they don't do anything stupid. I mean, like, what are they going to change the names to? because that's the big worry. I don't mind them raising these historic issues, because it's good to look into history and always remember it and explain it, as I'm about to do in a few moments. But I mean, what are they? Hopefully they'll keep the names, or they'll change it to something even better. But you know, the fear with these SNP government quangos, government so-called, is that they change it to something like ridiculous. Like they change, I don't know, what would they change the Redcoat cafe to? The Red Clydeside cafe or something like that, you know. The Red Flag cafe. And then what would they change the Jacobite one to? The Rosa Luxemburg cafe, or, you know, something, the Hammer and Sickle, or something, you know, something that's, no, that's not even, you know, it would be ridiculous. So that's the big worry, is that they do something to appease their SNP masters, which lowers the tone of the cafes in some way, and of course of the dinner venue. But that's your SNP types for you. They don't really know very much about British history in that regard. And in that regard, we do, because we have this magazine in the office. Redcoats. We got this a couple of years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And it basically tells you everything you could ever want to know about the Redcoats. And I'll just actually read 1 or 2 paragraphs here about Redcoats and where they came from and what they're about. And the reasons for red. In addition to cost considerations, the adoption of redcoats for the ranks of the British Army occurred for several reasons. The popular myth that red would obscure the flow of blood from combat wounds is specious. Bloodstains on the red actually appear black. However, amid the smoke of battle, the redcoat helped to distinguish friend from foe, assisted commanders in the placing of troops, and prevented the enemy from accurately assessing the numbers of British soldiers on the field, because tightly packed red ranks appeared as a solid block. In time, the redcoat became symbolic of worldwide British military might and actually raised the morale of the soldiers who wore it. However, the increasing accuracy of artillery and proliferation of highly accurate rifles rather than muskets were among the factors resulting in standard issue red giving way to khaki, which it did at the start of the 20th century. But the first redcoats for what was then at the time, just prior to the Union actually, occurred during the war against Spain in the Battle of the Dunes on the 14th of June 1658. And then redcoats again during the War of the Spanish Succession, which is a war that we're going to have to look into, because that occurred between 1701 and 1715, which was during the period of union, parliamentary union. And that war, the War of the Spanish Succession, did have an impact upon the consideration for the union of the parliaments, but I've never seen it properly explained anywhere. So it's something that we're going to have to write an article on in 2027, when it's the anniversary of the Union of the Parliaments. We're going to do a special Union of Crowns magazine, a Union Heart magazine, and we'll definitely have a page on that. And then, of course, the Jacobite Rising of 1745, when it was the British Army, and many of the redcoats would, of course, have been Scottish soldiers as well. Then it was the 7 Years' War, and then battles in Canada, and then the American War of Independence. That's another time when, or as we call it, the American War of Separation. That's another time when the redcoats became popularly known. That was 1775 to 1783. And then, of course, the Napoleonic Wars and the Peninsular War, and then the Crimea War, and then the Zulu Wars. And we've all seen Rorke's Drift and the Redcoats defending Rorke's Drift. And then the First Boer War, which finished in 1881. And then it was in the Sudan campaign with Kitchener that the Redcoats made their last battle stand, as it were, at the Battle of Firket on the 7th of June 1896, when a detachment of Connaught Rangers, Irish soldiers, manning a Maxim gun battery, wore their redcoats. But after that, once you get into the 1900s, the redcoats gave way to khaki and camouflage. But of course, the redcoats are still the formal uniforms for the Guards regiments and other regiments to this day. And let's just look at some pictures here, which I'll describe for you. The first redcoat picture that we've got up. Well, there you go. Who's that? Charging into battle in 1815. That's the redcoats of the Scots Greys. That famous painting by Lady Butler in 1881. Okay. Next picture. That's the redcoats of the Sutherland Highlanders at the Battle of Balaclava in 1854. A very famous stand of the Scottish Redcoats there against the Russian cavalry. Okay, now these guys are not redcoats, but this was the final painting of the man who painted that thin red line, Robert Gibb. The final painting just before he died was of Highlanders in World War I, and we put that out there just to show you the similarity between that and the previous picture. Notice the Highlanders kilted with bayonets and in a line with enemy wounded in front of them. Let's just switch back to the previous thin red line painting to see the similarity between those two paintings. Okay, back to the World War I one. The World War I one with that one. There you go. Indeed. Okay, now just to show that there are redcoats today, we encountered a few years ago when we were outside Holyrood at the opening of the Scottish Parliament, and which is a very British occasion, as we always say, and the Scots Guards were there. Let's see a few pictures of them in their redcoats. There they are, coming down the Royal Mile, and the first detachment there of Scots Guards are followed by a vehicle in which the Crown is sitting. Okay, next pic. There we go, close up of the Scottish Redcoats. Okay, there's another one. Okay, that was them arriving, and they had the backs to us then. Okay, this detachment turns round and comes over towards us. Okay, and we get a classic shot there, which is one of the best pictures AFFG's ever taken, actually. We were, as you can see, our person was right at the front there, and we've used that. We used that in the wee book for the Union, I think, that picture. Okay. Excellent. Was there some pictures in there of the vehicle? Oh yeah, I know what there was. There was pictures of this one. There we go. That's the Queen arriving. See the little lady there with the blue. That was the Queen. Okay. And you see there, the soldiers took up their positions all the way down the Royal Mile on both sides, right to the gates of Holyrood House, which sits there in the middle distance. Okay. So that was a good day. That was a good day, and we always say that, you know, we have a whole chapter here in our new book, One Big Country, about the Britishness of Holyrood. And a lot of people think, what are you talking about when you say that, Alistair? Well, all is revealed here on page 52, along with lots of other things which you can get by simply going to amazon.co.uk and searching for One Big Country, the premier book of the Union and the premier series. This is volume 1. We're aiming for 5 volumes of this over the next 5 years, because that's what's important at the moment. It's important at the moment to use this time that we've got to really get into making the case for the Union, which a lot of the people here on TikTok no doubt want to hear about. Teppis said we forgot the War of 1812. I think we maybe did. The War of 1812 was that when the Battle of Quebec occurred? Was that the battles against? Did that involve battles against Canada? You might be able to tell us, Teppis. In which case, you're absolutely right. Good. Please do keep sending in your comments on TikTok, folks. Teppis says the War of 1812 was the UK and Canada versus the USA. Indeed, it's not one we hear about very often, that one, is it? Alan says these nationalist pylons are a disgrace. They need to be ignored instead of giving them a voice. They get their way once and they keep going like a dog with a bone. One target to the next until all is erased. That's the way they go about these things, isn't it? That's the way they go about these things, which is not very pleasant at all. Dylan says, will the Labour Party's poll rating go down because of this? This is the problem that they've got with their candidate in Rochdale. And what do you think the implication will be on Labour's chances at the next general election? My view on that is that Labour need to keep the Muslim demographic on side, and they're going to have trouble doing that. That's my view on that. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, what with continuing conflict in the Middle East. Michael Bridges hopes that they don't change the name. And you're certainly right, because that would just be a victory, wouldn't it? But with all these government, so-called government quangos, like the Historic Environment Scotland, so many of them are placemen put there by the SNP establishment, who are required to do what the SNP tell them to do. Christopher says these pics that we've just shown there about the Scottish Redcoats would upset a few gnats. That's absolutely sure. Absolutely certain. Pauline liked it. Cheers, Pauline. Hope you're well. These days, even more upsetting for Douglas Chapman, says Christopher. Absolutely. I don't think they're changing the name as yet, Catherine. They're just investigating whether or not to do so. But they don't. They shouldn't. Alan says, if they do, I will definitely cancel my membership. I'm not backing these places that bow down to hate mobs anymore. Absolutely, we can't tolerate the hate mobs. Joseph says SNP will lose hundreds of seats, well, tens of seats in the next general election. Politico predicts SNP will have 17 seats in the next UK general election. Yes, they do, and that's an important kind of point to note, I think, because, you know, Humza had his reshuffle a week or so ago, and Kate Forbes was nowhere to be seen, and people are generally believe that Kate Forbes is the rising star of the SNP, but she was clearly deliberately excluded from Yusuf's most recent cabinet. And the reason for that, no doubt, will be just to keep her in the background and not be seen as a contender. But if, as the person there on TikTok is correct, and the SNP do lose a lot of seats at the general election coming up later this year, then Yusuf's leadership is going to be called into question. And while it looks like the SNP are going down at the moment, and while they may well suffer at the general election, as soon as they put in a new leader, if that leader is Kate Forbes, then they could very well start rising in the polls again, especially depending upon how good or bad Keir Starmer ends up doing as British Prime Minister. And remember, we've got a Holyrood election in 2026. So if there's a 2-year run-in for that, and Kate Forbes is the media darling in Scotland, and believe me, the media will make her the media darling, then you could be looking at the SNP getting all the support back again in 2026, because that's the way that politics works so often. Is there's such a large number of floating voters that they bounce between parties and they're easily swayed by one or the other. And so Scottish politics tends to be at the mercy of that floating ballot. And so for our part, as pro-UK people, as unionists in general, we can never really rest. We've always got to be making the case. We've always got to be standing up for what we believe in. And what we here at A Force for Good are doing is making a conscious effort to use this time to continue to develop our arguments, to continue to develop the material that we produce, our magazines and our books, continue to build our network, and just continue to consolidate the pro-UK position as much as we can, so that if called upon, we have got the materials to help make the case, as well as using this time, of course, to convince people that the United Kingdom is an important thing, the best thing that we can possibly have at the moment. And so if you agree with us, please do consider supporting us in whatever way that you can. Christopher says the media are facile and supine in Scotland. That's absolutely true. James says it's a great shame the nationalists only want to cause division. Their splitting of the dummy over a cafe name Their spitting of the dummy over a cafe name highlights their pathetic, childish tantrums. Paul says, things are going the unionist way. Let's not snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, because the nationalists are facing defeat at this general election. Well, I absolutely agree with you, and so much, Paul, is going to be in the hands of it's going to be out of our hands, because it's going to depend upon how well Labour do, if indeed Labour become the next British government. And a lot of people are very concerned, of course, about just what Labour will do. From a unionist perspective, of course, we're concerned about the amount of new powers that they're going to give directly into the hands of the SNP, so that the SNP can wield those new powers against Labour in 2026. And that's really what it amounts to. That sounds ridiculous, but that's what would be happening if Keir Starmer gets in and he gives more powers to the SNP. These are powers that will be wielded to try to stop Labour getting into power in 2026. That's how stupid, how utterly stupid the Labour leadership is, unfortunately, as far as dealing with the SNP is concerned. And we know this because this is how they deal with them all the time. Let's hope, though, that wiser heads prevail. And, you know, maybe we should actually send a copy of this to Keir Starmer and a copy to Anas Sarwar in order to maybe say at least, we told you so. If you haven't got a copy of this, folks on TikTok, go to amazon.co.uk and just search for One Big Country. It's a fantastic education. James says, the United Kingdom is for keeps. Scottish nationalism will never prevail. Let's get this up there. There you go. TC agrees with Paul. There you go. There you go. Christopher says, just buying it now. That's a screenshot if ever there was one. So, Aaron says, England are taking all of Scotland's money. Well, I don't really know what to say to you there, Aaron. Other than, that's not really so. Chaser says that he doesn't obey the king because he's Scottish. Well, the British monarchy is actually derived from the Scottish monarchy, sir. And we constantly put this out. We explained this in our magazine, King and Country, Chaser. And in fact, here is the family tree going right back to Robert the Bruce there, going right through to our man James VI of Scotland, who became the King of England. And it was through him that the others are descended. And then when it got to Queen Anne in 1714, when she passed away, there was nobody to take over, so they had to go back down the line of the Scots King James VI to his daughter Elizabeth to find Elizabeth's grandson, who became George I. So the British monarchy is very much a Scottish monarchy, sir, and you can get this by going to aforceforgood.uk/shop-1, and we explain all that fascinating history in this magazine. We push out our merchandise a lot because that's what keeps us going, folks. It really does. Because we've got to keep on the air somehow, and this is really worthwhile education here. Paul says, send a copy of One Big Country to every Labour MSP and councillor. Well, I think George Soros would need to fund us if we were going to have the cash to do something like that, but I certainly second the sentiment there, Paul. Absolutely. Derek says we should not be dictatored to. That's a good word. By the Nats. The cafe should stick to their names. I, for one, will not be bullied by them. Quite right, Derek. Quite right. Now, we've been doing a lot of history today, but we're going to do a wee bit more history as well, because it's time for On This Day in British History. Now, afterwards, we've got a cracking wee prize for the question that we'll ask. And it's this wee lapel badge, a pin badge there, sort of thing you can put on your tie or your collar or your hat or your bag or whatever. And we'll ask a question later in the programme and just send your answer to contact@aforceforgood.uk. So today is Valentine's Day, but it is also Ash Wednesday. And Ash Wednesday is the beginning of Lent. And Lent is the period, the Christian period, which commemorates the 40 days and 40 nights that Jesus spent in the desert, being tempted by the devil prior to him going on his ministry. And some people use the Lent period, which is actually 47 days, to deny themselves certain things. It's both a Catholic and a Protestant thing, although not all the Protestant denominations follow it, but I think many of them do. And so Ash Wednesday is the first day of Lent, and it's also the day that there is a rather crazy football match that occurs in an area in Ashbourne in Derbyshire called the Royal Shrovetide football match. And this is a football match which is not really a football match, it's more like a kind of rugby scrum, which has been going on every year since 1667. And it's a game between two parts of the town, and they start in the middle of the town, and a ball gets thrown out, and the winner is the side that gets the ball to the other side of the town. And it's a bit of a kind of crazy thing, and it doesn't have any rules except committing murder or manslaughter is prohibited and unnecessary violence is frowned upon, and the ball may not be carried in a motorised vehicle or hidden in a bag or in a coat or in a rucksack, and that cemeteries and churchyards are out of bounds, and that playing after 10 p.m. is forbidden, and to score a goal the ball must be tapped 3 times in the area of the goal at the other side of the town. And it begins on Shrove Tuesday, and it's a 2-day game, and we've got 1 or 2 pictures of it here which we'll just put up. And so there you get the idea. There's the ball in the middle. I think that's from last year. Okay. And that was the picture yesterday, and the ball gets thrown out from that centre there. And it seems to be quite a patriotic thing there, because they've got the Union Jacks flying, which one always likes to see there. Okay. And that's the ball that's yesterday. That's the ball about to get thrown out for the first time. Nice Union Jack with a crown in the middle of the ball there. Fantastic. Every football should look like that, in my opinion. Now, what's very interesting is it's called the Royal Shrovetide football match because it was given royal assent back in 1928 when the then Prince of Wales, who became King Edward VIII, turned up to support it. Well, Prince Charles turned up to support it in 2003, and there's a couple of fantastic pictures here which we'll just put up. Here's the first one. He's about to get lifted up onto these guys' shoulders and carried through town, Prince Charles with the ball there. And the next picture is an absolute cracker. There you go. Prince Charles getting carried through Ashbourne, Derbyshire, on the shoulders of these two worthies there, with a good crowd of lads in the background cheering him on. Classic photograph, that. Really, really good. definitely cheers you up when you see that picture. So that was back in 2003. He needs to go back, I think, definitely, and repeat that one again. Although he was 20 years younger when he was doing that. So maybe not so much these days. But maybe Prince William, actually. It would be Prince William's turn, and I'm sure he will turn up one of these days for the same treatment. Okay, excellent. So there's also a similar game that only lasts for 2 hours in Atherstone, which is in Warwickshire, which seems to be just like the same kind of thing. Some videos on that which you can see on the internet, which are a little bit scary, I have to say. Anyway, that's today, Ash Wednesday. I don't know how that goes down with how that went down when it started out in 1667 with the local minister, but anyway, it's a tradition that's carried on ever since. Every Ash Wednesday and Shrove Tuesday. Cool. I'll ask a question about that in a minute. Alan says, will you ever resume the walks around famous sites that you used to stream? Always were enjoyable and informative. Good stuff, Alan. Yeah, we do have ideas for that. What we find with these things is they are quite time consuming and quite expensive for us to do. We do have 1 or 2 places that we'd like to go to related to the Union when we can take a couple of days out of our schedule. And thanks for suggesting that. We'll need to look at that again this year, definitely. Good. Looking at our friends on TikTok, folks, please send in your thoughts. Julianne says she's giving up on the Union for Lent. That's something, but it's not very helpful. Tepes says to Julianne, Burns was a Unionist. There you go. Somebody says Bay City Rollers. Well, Bay City Rollers were a great Scottish band, but also a great British band, because they brought awareness of Scotland and tartan to not just to the rest of the United Kingdom, but they really helped to popularise tartan in the popular culture in the latter half of the 20th century. I remember them when I was growing up in the 70s, and the very striking images, I have to say. We've got a picture somewhere of them meeting Princess Anne. You can find that on the internet. That's a good picture. Here's Derek with a suggestion that we should give one big country to Douglas Ross and all the rest of the leaders of MPs and MSP parties. Yep, makes sense. There you go. Christopher says the Rollers were ardent Unionists. Hello to Derek Hamilton from Armadale. Good. Well, here's a wee question, folks. For this little badge that we've never given away on the programme ever in all of the 90 broadcasts of Good Evening Britain. Please send your answer, folks. If you've never done it before, you're in with a very good chance of winning. Please send your answer via email to contact@aforceforgood.uk. And the question is, today is the first day of what? Today is the first day of what? That's your question, folks. We will announce the winner at the end of the prog. Good. And send your answers to contact@aforceforgood.uk. let's get those answers coming straight in. Now, I want to look, just to tell you that we've had a busy week actually. We've written 3 articles this week, which you'll find at our website, aforceforgood.uk, 2 of them on immigration and 1 of them on history. The one on history is a repurposed article that appeared originally on our legacy site several years ago. And this year we're going to get all the articles on history from the legacy site onto the aforceforgood.uk site. But the 2 on immigration, one is a reply to this lady here, who says mass migration is slowly bankrupting the UK, and she makes a lot of good points in this video. However, one point which made me stop and pause is when she says here, the trouble is British workers can't or won't do the jobs. And I wondered about that, and I thought, how true is that? And I know that we hear that, but for me it doesn't really ring true. And so I wrote an article on it, which you can find on our website here. And the article is called Why We Don't Need Immigration to Fill Vacancies. And I make reference to her article here. And I say that it doesn't ring true, and for 3 reasons. Firstly, immigration itself creates more vacancies. As more people come into society, they create more demand for goods and services. This in turn creates more vacancies, which require more people to fill them, which requires more immigration, which creates more vacancies, which require more people to fill them, and so on and on. And the situation that we're in at the moment is mass immigration creates more vacancies and thereby creates a demand for more immigration. It's really that's the issue. You can't blame British workers for not filling these vacancies, because many of these vacancies are only there because of mass immigration, and as a consequence there are often also very low wage jobs as well. So in an economy without that constant supply of people, the vacancies which did exist would be more keenly sought after and would pay more. And therefore, contrary to what we're told, the British workers would be more inclined to fill them. And it's not just Alistair McConnachie making that argument. This was the argument that I took from the House of Lords report back in 2008, when they wrote a very insightful report entitled The Economic Impact of Immigration, and they made the argument there, which I've just detailed. They say here, because immigration expands the overall economy, it cannot be expected to be an effective policy tool for significantly reducing vacancies. And they further elaborate upon that. The argument that sustained net immigration is needed to fill vacancies and that immigrants do the jobs that locals cannot or will not do is fundamentally flawed. It ignores the potential alternatives to immigration for responding to labour shortages, including the price adjustments of a competitive labour market and the associated increase in local labour supply that can be expected to occur in the absence of immigration. These are all just economic facts. So while of course there may be some British people that simply don't want to do any kind of jobs whatsoever, it's not fair to tar all British people with the idea that we're all just somehow sitting on our backsides and we absolutely need immigrants in order to ride around town in motorcycle bicycles. You know, it's not like that's completely really missing the point. And the second reason is immigration fills a wages gap, not a skills gap. It's not that we're wanting skills, it's that we don't have the people who will do the jobs at the price that they would get paid for it. And the third reason is that not everybody actually wants to work in fields which are entirely dominated by recent immigrants, and we've heard that argument anecdotally, especially in the care home industry, which is an industry which recruits from abroad to a very large extent. So ultimately, the economy should serve the people, and we shouldn't be constantly importing people in order to serve the economy. That was one of the articles that we put out there this week. And the other was the other was on asylum numbers as well, which are really going crazy at the moment. And we compared asylum numbers in this year, in 2022, the last year for which we have information. We compared that with the asylum figures in 1979. And this is some original research that we did here. And in 1979, we discovered that there were 1,563 primary applications for refugee status. 1,563. However, in 2022, there was 81,130 applications, which related to virtually 100,000 individuals when you include dependents. And so what that is saying is the 2022 figure is 52 times the 1979 figure. And is it really right to say that the world has become 52 times more dangerous since 1979? Of course not. 1979 was a hugely dangerous decade worldwide. Wars everywhere, with the Cold Wars raging in Africa. So clearly, what's changed? And we list 5 reasons why asylum applications are 52 times what they were in 1979. And really at the top is the fact that in the 70s, the legal concept of human rights had not yet been weaponized politically. You didn't have immigration and asylum lawyers and legal firms to the extent that we have them now. There was no immigration industry in the UK. There were very few charities and NGOs that had a vested financial and ideological interest in working to perpetuate the immigration and asylum market. And as a consequence, in the intervening years since 1979, this legal sector, this charity sector, this NGO sector has achieved a massive victory over the United Kingdom government. And their victory has been so complete that we are at the point today where even a Conservative government will pay millions of pounds of British taxpayers' money each year to these organisations to help them oppose the government's own policies on immigration and asylum. That's how great the victory has been for that sector over not just the British government, but over British democracy. And so the way out of that is to have a government that defunds that sector entirely, because it's ridiculous that, for example, charities that are lobbying against the Rwanda bill have been given £209 million of our money in the recent past. 265 so-called charities. That's a lot of our taxpayers' money in order to confound the democratic will of the British people. And the fourth and fifth reasons are actually not the main reasons, but they're certainly reasons. The main reasons are the ones that I've just discussed, but the others which are also impactful are the fact that there's a massive pull factor with our generous UK welfare payments, and the mass communication systems, of course, have become a lot easier since 1979, and the mass transport systems have become more accessible. But the real reason is simply the victory of the ideology of the immigration industry, the victory of their ideology, which has led to their to the funding as well, which they enjoy, which means that they can basically decide what the policies of the nation are going to be, defund them, and will be some way towards getting things back onto an even keel again. And as we say there, it's time to overhaul the legal framework and to defund the immigration industry, which means removing all British taxpayer funding from the legal firms, the charities and NGOs which have a vested financial and or ideological interest in perpetuating this massive movement of people into the UK. Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if we get a government that can do that, that would be an ideological revolution, an absolute revolution. And we may be some time off that, but it's certainly what is ultimately required. Now, will we hear that from groups like the Reform Party? Let's hope so. Let's get that information to them and let's share that around. Great stuff. Great stuff. Now, folks, Paul says asylum seekers used to be ballet dancers, athletes and diplomats from the Eastern Bloc. Yes, I remember that in the 80s it was always the Soviets or people fleeing for whatever reason the Soviet Union and somehow managing to get out of the Soviet Union. Don't know how they wangled that one. Christopher says, you have just defined cultural decadence in your analysis, a society that works against its own interests. Indeed, TC says, ever get the feeling we're being taken for idiots and mugs? Yeah, it's a depressing feeling, a very depressing feeling. And Matt Goodwin wrote an article which appeared in The Sun yesterday, and in it he finished off by saying, he was talking about the housing crisis and how it's basically comes down to just the huge numbers of people that are coming into the country. He goes, in 12 years' time, Britain's population is projected to explode by another 6.6 million, 6.1 million of which will be because of immigration. This is equivalent to about 5 cities the size of Birmingham and is 70% of the way to a city the size of London. Where exactly are we going to house these people seriously? This is why increasingly many young Brits are now giving up on the social contract that has underpinned our country for decades. This is such an important point, the social contract. Namely, if you work hard and play by the rules, you'll get a foot on the housing ladder. These are people who are playing by the rules, who have jobs, who have strong prospects, who want to see the best in Britain, who want to contribute to the collective pot for decades. But today, many of them cannot escape the conclusion they have not just been left behind, but actually screwed over. This is why, unsurprisingly, young Brits are now rapidly giving up on the idea that their leaders in Westminster are serious about solving the real drivers of the housing crisis, rather than just fiddling around the edges. Britain can have mass, uncontrolled and unsustainable immigration, or it can have affordable and available housing, but it can't have both. Very well said by Matthew Goodwin in The Sun there on the 13th of February 2023. Budgie Burger is not impressed with reform. He says they're just the Tories under another name. Don't expect anything different. Well, you may be right, but let's always hope for the best, and let's get good ideas out to people who might be able to make a difference. And even Keir Starmer, you know, we worry that things might go completely wrong under his leadership, but maybe he'll surprise us. Maybe he'll realise that the social contract is something that needs to be protected, and maybe he'll throw off the power of the NGOs and the charity sector and the London metropolitan elite that is over him, and maybe he will be able to do the right thing by the rest of us. Now, our competition. Do we have a winner? Let me see if we have got a winner. I said the question was, today is the first day of what? The answer was, it's the first day of Lent, and the winner is James Campbell. Congratulations, James. This will be winging its way to you tomorrow morning. Thanks for taking part. A few people took part tonight. I'm sorry that you didn't all win, but there'll be other opportunities in the future because we've got a wee pack of these. And thank you to the person who contributed a wee pack of these. We do appreciate that. You know who you are. Alan says, well done, James. Debbie says, congrats, James. Catherine says, congratulations, James, as does Christopher. As does Paul. James says, thank you very much. Will wear with pride. I'm sure you will, James. Great supporter of A Force for Good is James. Thanks for everything that you do, sir. Okay, it's after the top of the hour, so we'll say good night, folks. Thank you to everybody who has been commenting on TikTok and elsewhere. User says, nice little pin badge. Thank you, sir. We'll be back next Wednesday. It just remains for me to say, God bless the United Kingdom and God save the King. See you next time.